prepare ourselves, if you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. Now over your heart, I extend I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that there is a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. You can use it anytime, all times. That power for good in the universe is something that no matter how you've used that power in the past, it's never taken away from you. You always have it. No matter how many times you might have screwed up in the past, the power is still there, fully for you. That power is restorative. That power begins to restore marriages. It restores health. It restores self-confidence. It restores relationships with your kids. That power is a power that can restore countries' abilities to talk to one another and not invade one another. That power can restore any bank account issues that you might have. That power is restorative. And when it restores, when we get into the groove of that power and we begin to use it as it was meant to be used, what happens is it begins to feel like a miracle is happening in our lives. But we know at this church, it's not a miracle at all. It's simply all in the day's work. We say it's all in the day of God's work, if we begin to use the power. Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes I need a miracle. Sometimes I grab on to what looks like real out there with such a grip. I grip onto the economy. I grip onto, all those things that, relationships that feel broken. I grip onto the fact that it's allergy season right now. And sometimes when we grip onto the outer, when that outer looks so real to us, when our grip is so great, we need a miracle. We need more than just all in a day's work. I've had people in my office the last week or so who felt like they wanted a miracle, that they needed a miracle. And to be honest with you, I felt like they needed a miracle as well. So I went back to a book that I know about that's called The 12 Conditions of a Miracle. It was written by a man named Todd Michael. And what he did was, Todd Michael is not only a Bible scholar, but he's also a hitchhiker. And he tells this story, not a hitchhiker. No, he's not a hitchhiker. He's a hiker, all right? He just hikes. I used to hitchhike. He actually gets a little backpack and hikes. No, all right. So one day he's hiking in the Continental Divide. And as he's making his dinner, he boils the water to put that little packet of food. Have you ever seen the hiker's food? Anyway, he gets his pot all boiling, and because hikers are contemplative people very often, he sits there and he's just kind of mesmerized by the boiling water. And what he notices is that the water, when it jumps out of when it gets boiling and it jumps out of his pot onto the right side, it goes down to one side and it picks up speed. And eventually, that water will end up in either the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, depending on where he's sitting. And on the other side, when it pops out the water, it'll go down the other side, and it will go into the opposite ocean, either the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. And he begins to contemplate this about his life. And he said, it's kind of like how the law of cause and effect works in our life. That from the point of origin, one step, one thought, one word, when it comes down either on the side of lack and limitation or on the side of pure potentiality, it picks up speed as it tumbles down. and it gets bigger and faster. And what happens is it amplifies our intention. So he began to think about that whole idea that we also are on our own personal continental divide and have an opportunity to send our thoughts down lack and limitation or down the other side to that pure potentiality. Well, he began to study later on after this experience. He began to study a part of the Bible from a story from Jesus, the life of Jesus. He came away with believing that he had uncovered a code that enabled us to understand 12 conditions that are available in a miracle. And these 12 conditions are available to each and every one of us today as well. So I want to read you, it's the story of the loaves and fishes. Now, the story of loaves and fishes, for those of you who know the Bible, and you know, I recognize I'm dragging this Bible out twice in a matter of 6 weeks. So if some of you are getting the shivers already, just kind of get a hold of yourself, because I'm going to go ahead and read from the Bible again, all right? So just be in your chairs and everything. But this story of the loaves and fishes is actually in all 4 of the Gospels. I'm choosing the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, 13 through 20. And I want to just read it to you today, and then we're going to take kind of a deeper dive in it for the next several weeks. We're going to walk along his uncovering of these 12 conditions that are available in this story, that if we begin to learn about, we can become miracle makers. Because didn't Jesus say, what I do, you can do, and even greater things than I do, you can do? But you have to learn about how to do it. So from this, chapter 13, when Jesus heard, he departed by boat alone in a desert place. Now remember that place, the desert place. When the people heard of it, and they followed him by land and from the cities. And Jesus went out and saw large crowds, and he had pity for them, and he healed the sick. When it was evening, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a lonely place, and it's getting late. Dismiss the people so the men could go to the village and buy food for themselves." I don't know. I guess the women weren't too hungry then, but. But he said unto them, "It is not necessary for them to go. Give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have nothing here except 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Jesus said to them, Bring them to me." And he ordered the people to sit down on the ground, and he took the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, and he looked up to heaven and blessed them, and he broke them and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples placed them before the people. So they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up the fragments which were left over, the 12 baskets. Remember the desert. Jesus went into the desert. And so what Todd Abrams says is the first condition that we need to master is the condition of becoming empty, both externally and internally. We need to become empty externally by allowing ourselves to go into our own desert. You know, because by the time you need a miracle in your life, you've got a lot of people involved, don't you? You got your family involved. You've got your posse involved. You've just got co-workers are involved. Everybody's all involved. You need to step back. You need to externally become empty. Go to your own desert place. And that's not easy to do. You know, just before this story is told, Jesus learned that his good friend and relative, John the Baptist, was beheaded. And Jesus was a human being. He must have been full of rage. He must have been full of sadness. He must have had some desire for revenge. But Jesus did what Jesus does, which is to teach us what happens when you are full of rage, when you are full of sadness, when you want revenge, when you need a miracle. You need to step back and get out of the fray. Ernest Holmes, our founder, would say, we need to turn away from the howlers. We need to step into our own desert place. Because here's what happens when we let folks inside of us, they mess up our miracle field. They mess it up. Amen? They don't want to. They're good-meaning folks, but they tend to mess up our miracle field. So our work is to withdraw. Take a walk in a park. Come to human spirit. We will definitely help you step back in a place that's full of love and desert and an opportunity for you to look. But if you can't do that, just go for a drive. Go into your backyard and tell your partner, tell your kids, stay in the house. I'm going in the backyard for a minute all by my, just don't come with me. I'm going to my desert place out there, okay? Stay inside. Whatever you need to do, step back and allow them to be inside. The other thing that we need to do after we get the outside, we go to our desert place, is we begin to understand that we have to empty ourselves on the inside. We have to let go of the hostages that we've got in our life. You and I have hostages that we're still running around with. And we have to empty ourselves of those hostages. Maybe you're still harboring something about how you came up and who brought you up. Those are hostages, and we have to let go of them. Maybe it's somebody who's in your workplace that you've got hostage. You have to let go of them. Maybe it's an ex. You have to let go of them. In order to become empty from the inside, we have to allow our hostages to gently move on. Ernest Holmes, others would say they have to go back into the bloated nothingness from which they came. Because truthfully, our hostages are all made up. There may be some people who did wrong things to us. I don't mean that, but we're still carrying it around. They're probably happy as little clams. And we're mad as hell because we've got them held as hostages. We have to empty ourselves. People say, do I have to forgive in order to empty myself of my hostages? I don't know. It's the only way I've been able to do it, but maybe you can do it another way. The most important thing, though, is you can't think about them. You can't be worried about them. You can't be running, talking about them all over again and what they did and how they did it and why they shouldn't have done it. To let go of all of that. Has to be gone, amen? Just let it go. To Uncle Bert, you're a carpetbagger. You don't belong here. Go on, beat it. Yeah, gently and lovingly, of course, but beat it. See, emptying ourselves, if we're so full of stuff, then what we want in terms of miracle-making conditions cannot come in. Many of you remember the Buddhist story in which the young American Buddhist has got his PhD and he's very bright and he's learned all the sutras and he goes to Japan and he finds a master and he says, Master, will you teach me? I want to learn from you. Before the master can open her mouth, he's just going on about all the sutras he's learned and all the everything he knows about Buddhism and a life and just on and on and on. And so while he continues to go on and introduce himself in such a glorious way, the master says to herself, let's make some tea. And so she boils some water and she makes some tea and she begins to pour it into his cup. And she keeps pouring and the tea is just going all over the ground and his shoes and he's talking and then finally he notices, what is she doing? And he says, Master, the cup is full. And she said, yes, and so are you. Nothing more can get into a full cup. We have to empty ourselves. The second condition, the first one is emptiness. The second condition is to align with compassion. Now, aligning with compassion is not something we do naturally for the most part. I hate to say that. It's natural within us. It's our nature, but we don't naturally do it. Why? Because we've been schooled out of it. We have learned that instead of being compassionate, I want to compare myself with other people so I feel good. So instead of being compassionate, I'm comparative, and blessed be, if they come up short, that's a great thing because it makes me look better. That's learned behavior. We can unlearn it. We can unlearn it. That's why we come to a center like this, is to unlearn those patterns. What we need to do is to begin to really take inventory of where it is we lack compassion. Because in order to be a miracle maker, we have to become more compassionate in our lives. In order to become a miracle maker, we have to look at the life of Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu and find out what it was about these masters. You know, Marianne Williamson says, the great masters don't have anything we don't have. They have great love inside, and so do we. The difference is they don't have anything else. See, it's the anything else that we've got to get rid of so we can get back to love. The Bible says that when Jesus came out of his desert time, he walked upon those who needed healing with only thing he had, which is love. And he began to heal. You and I can become healers if we can begin to listen in a new way, without judgment, with compassion, with love in our heart. It's not easy to do, but it can be done. And when we do that, when we learn to listen as Jesus learned to listen, we learn to accept other people as they are. And we're more compassionate. We learn to accept people who are loving as they want to love. We learn to accept people who are voting as they want to vote. We are learning to accept people who are dressing as they want to dress. We are learning to love people who are working as they want to work or not work. We're learning to love when we learn how to listen with compassion. And that's the heart of a miracle maker. Now, it takes time. It takes practice. Practice, practice, practice. And so this week, what I'm going to ask you to do is to take an inventory of your compassion every night. Look where you might have been more judgmental than you needed to be. See, we make spirituality way more complicated than we need to. Becoming a miracle maker, what if it was as easy as embracing and understanding these 12 conditions? What if it was that simple? So we have to ask ourselves, when we get up in the morning and we go to the office, what is the first thing we're thinking? Are we thinking, oh, man, she's wearing that again? It didn't look very good the first time, and it's really not good today. Or what a dork he is, you know? Whatever it is that we're thinking, become aware of it. Because once we become aware of those judgmental thoughts, and we come to a church like this, and we know we have the power for good in the universe that we can use, and we want to use it, I guarantee you all you have to do is set your intention. That is it. In the morning, when you get up, say, I am compassionate today. Say that with me. I am compassionate today. Say it another time. I am compassionate today. Look, if we say that, the universe will take care of organizing all the rest. That person will wear something nice or whatever it is. Whatever it is, the universe will organize all that up. So I'm going to invite you every day this week to ask yourself, am I aligned with compassion? Knowing that when you're not aligned with compassion, what's happening for you is you don't feel good about yourself. And that's where to work. Not at the external, but why do I need to compare today? Why do I need to have an opinion about anything? I don't. I just have to have an opinion about myself. You know, you have, and I'll give you a hint. It's easier to do that. It's easier to be compassionate if you wake up every day and take yourself into the desert, even for 3 minutes. Just back up for 3 minutes. Don't just jump out of bed, do. Jump out of bed or stay in bed and sit up and just stay there quietly. It'll make it much easier for you to relearn how compassion works in your life. But here's the thing. Our work is to recreate our soil so this seed of power can bloom. And no matter what we've done, it can happen. King Tut's tomb, when they uncovered it, there was some wheat seeds that had been in there for 3,400 years. And they planted the wheat seeds, and they grew. And they grew. So no matter how dormant you've been in your life, in terms of using the power, it can grow. We're going to plant it this month. So I'm going to ask you this month to really be attentive to emptying out and to becoming aligned with compassion. Now, I want to see you back next week because we're going to keep going with this. We're going to keep uncovering these 12 conditions of a miracle that will enable us to live a blissful life. That's what you were sent here to do, by the way. You were sent here to live an outrageously blissful life. You know, all this stuff that is created for us to climb the hills to climb up. No, we're done. We're done. Let's take this message into prayer. Knowing that there is a power and a glory for God that is available to us all of the time. It's a power that is within us. And when I turn my attention to it, I become a healer. I begin to understand at a deeper level that it is not God and me, but God as me. I know I'm not all of God, but God is all of me. And when I know that, I walk taller. I laugh harder. I cry harder. I love stronger when I understand who I am. I give thanks. I give thanks for each being in this church, for creating an atmosphere in which we can gather and love and laugh and learn and sing. I give thanks. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.